And welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147. It's time for this week's Rocky Talk, brought to you by Rocky Mountain Equipment. Even with all the snow that we've had late in winter and into spring in Western Canada, there's still a sizable part of the prairies that is facing a moisture deficit, or at least a return to, I think we could call it, more normal dry conditions as we head into seeding here for 2018. And joining us on the phone for Rocky Talk this week, we are pleased to have Chris Sherwick. He is an agronomy specialist with Vaterstad, the company behind Seedhawk Drills. How are things today, Chris?
Pretty good there, Kelvin. How are you doing today?
Doing well here too. And talking about seeding, it feels like we're maybe getting closer to getting into the field in more areas. What are you reminding growers when it comes to the moisture situation this spring and kind of the agronomy, some of the thought process behind how we want to approach seeding considering the moisture conditions across Western Canada this year?
Well, I guess one of the things that is really going to be important to remember is even though we have had a little bit of moisture in the terms of snow over the last month or so, there's still going to be quite a sizable moisture deficit across most of the prairies. I mean, to look at Regina, for an example, they had 3 inches of snow or 3 inches of moisture all last year. And so then a little bit of snowfall this year certainly isn't going to make up that deficit. And so when you have that, it's going to be extremely important to preserve as much moisture as possible in the soil and take advantage of the moisture that is there in the first place. Because what you're going to want to do is, with this little bit later of a year, you're going to want to get that crop out of the ground as quickly as possible.
So what does that mean for, let's say, fertilizer placement, for example?
With the fertilizer placement, you're going to want that fertilizer at a reasonably safe distance as possible, but you're also going to want it to be in proximity to the seed where it can access those nutrients readily quickly, because we have seen some instances last year where, because of the moisture deficit, fertilizer that was placed a little bit further away from the seed was unable to access that, like the roots weren't able to grow into it. And so then their growth ended up being stunted for a better part of the year. And so then you've seen cases where, the crop was a little bit later in staging, or in some extreme cases, the plant stand turned out to be quite thin because the plant simply didn't make it. And so then the basic concept regarding Seedhawk's fertilizer placement is that the fertilizer is placed 1.5 inches away from the seed. So it allows the roots of the seed to grow into the fertilizer right away when it needs it, to give it that extra jump that it needs to get that early start that we need this upcoming year.
We're of course seeing increasing adoption of variable rate technology. Chris, can you fill us in on how Seedhawk's drills fit into a variable rate approach?
Yes, absolutely. With the Seedhawk drill, the advantage that our Icon Seedhawk system has is the fact that we have, for each 10-foot of toolbar section, you have one electric seed motor or fertilizer motor that meters out the product in question. So when you have a different variability over the course of the entire toolbar, say if you're on some variable land and you have one section that's on relatively flat ground, then the other side is digging onto the side of a hill, you're obviously going to have different soil types, and you're going to have different requirements for not only fertilizer, but you're also going to have different requirements for seeding rate as well too. And I know Corey Wellness out of Crop Pro has been talking about that a lot more this last little while. So when you have that variability, you can be able to dial that in a lot more accurately as to what exactly your prescription mapping is going to need, as opposed to 1 meter over the course of all the meters in the tank and over the course of the entire toolbar.
Finally, then, we're starting to see more and more producers trying to use planters for seeding canola. What are you seeing for the Tempo planter and potential on the prairies?
I think there's quite a bit of potential surrounding that, because guys always want to maximize their return on investment. And when you're spending $700 on a bag of canola seed, well, of course, it's going to vary depending on the genetics, whether you add Jumpstart or Lumiderm. That's quite a substantial investment that you're putting into the ground, and you're going to want to get the best bang for your buck. With the Tempo corn and soybean planter, the biggest thing is the ability to, get the right amount of plants per square foot that you need. And the Canola Council requires about 5 to 7 plants. And with the singulation process that the Tempo planter has and the pressurized system, it pressurizes the seed all the way from when the seed is pressed onto the seed wheels with the evenly spaced grooves, all the way down through the drop tube into the soil. So it takes the gravity and vibration component completely out of the equation when you get up to higher speeds, say 9 or 10 miles an hour. And it also places those plants evenly apart one by one. So that way you can dial in the exact amount of plants per square foot that you want. And of course, by extension, then you're lowering your seeding rate in the process.
All right. Well, here's hoping to sooner than later start to seeding across the prairies. Thanks for taking the time today, Chris.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me.
Chris Sherwick, agronomy specialist with Väderstad, joining us here on Rocky Talk. Of course, you can find out more info on SeedHawk drills from your local Rocky Mountain equipment dealer and at seedhawkseeder.com, although Chris says watch their social media feeds and more for an announcement regarding a new website with the Väderstad transition that is taking place with SeedHawk. We'll be back. Real Ag Radio continues right after this.